Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Heal with Kat podcast. My name is Kat, and I am your host, and welcome to part one of a two-part powerful conversation around narcissism and narcissistic abuse with my guest, Dana S. Diaz. Podmatch has been coming through, you guys. I did not have high expectations when I signed up on Podmatch. I was like, I'll do it for a couple months, and then I'll be gone. Absolutely not. If I get to meet people like Dana on a daily basis, a weekly basis, and get to have conversations with them, I will keep paying for this platform because it has been so powerful. And, you know, the podcast has really been going through a bit of a shift, right? A lot of my previous solo episodes are very focused on FCT. And I actually kind of felt at some point that I was getting to a place where I had been talking so much about FCT, I really wanted to introduce new concepts of information and expand my personal knowledge on things that I learn about and teach about in my work. I mean, we can always be learning. I'm always going to be a student of my work and of life. The minute I start telling myself that I know everything, the ship has sailed. So it was really just in an effort to get more guests on the podcast and learn more. And as you guys know, the last few episodes have been really impactful, really empowering. People have been sharing their vulnerable stories, but this episode takes the cake for me as one of the top most interesting, shocking, and yet powerful conversations I've had with anyone, probably even in my life. You're going to hear Dana, my guest's childhood story and how she's lived her life up until the last 4 years and how quickly she has turned her pain into something purposeful and how she has healed her life with narcissistic abuse. We talk about mother relationships. We talk about narcissism. We talk about all kinds of abuse. So I want to say, this week's episode is heavy at times. We do talk about things like abuse, like lives being taken. We talk about potentially triggering topics. If that is not supportive for you, then this part one and part two, specifically part one, may not be supportive for you. And I just want to keep that in mind for those of you who are working through situations where you feel those topics will not be supportive for you. However, if you feel that it's something that you can tolerate and lean into, you're going to learn so much from this episode. Dana does not hold back. She is honest. She is real. She is authentic. She even calls herself out. She is the real freaking deal. So let me tell you a little bit about our guest, Dana, this week. Dana S. Diaz is a wife, mother, and author of the best-selling book, Gasping for Air, The Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse. In addition to her lifelong experience with narcissistic abuse, Dana's education in journalism and psychology at DePaul University in Chicago gave her the ability to accurately verbalize and express how narcissistic abuse creates confusion and conflict within its victims so that she can help other victims know that they are not alone and better understand their circumstances. Today, Dana is a proud voice for fellow victims who are unable, afraid, or ashamed to share their experiences. She has been a guest on nearly 200 podcasts globally, striving to create awareness and understanding to ensure victims are given the support that they need to first understand their situation and then begin the healing process. She has also been featured as a speaker in 2 summits for healing after trauma. Her first book, chronicling her abusive marriage that lasted nearly 3 decades, started as a journal that she hid under the couch cushion in the basement. Dana's second book, Choking on Shame, The Scapegoat Child in a Narcissistic Family, was a #1 new release on Amazon after its mid-September release. The book delves into Dana's life as an unwanted pregnancy and child and the physical and verbal abuse she endured as a result. Her final book in the Narcissist trilogy, Swallowing My Pride, is expected to be released in early 2025. The sequel to GFA brings the first 2 books full circle with recovery, healing, new love, and another narcissist Dana hadn't seen coming. I'm just going to have us get straight into part 1. Enjoy, take notes, let the tears flow. I know that I pretty much had tears in my eyes the entire conversation. And let it heal you, because if you allow it to, it will be. Dana, welcome to the Heal with Kat podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I am really looking forward to this conversation today because I think that there's kind of a societal misconception of what a narcissist really is. And I know it's on a spectrum of some kind, right? Like
yes.
we have to, yeah. So you authored the book called Swallowing My Pride, right?
That is my third book that is
Oh,
in process. But yes, I have two other books that are already out: Gasping for Air, The
yes.
Stranglehold of Narcissistic Abuse, and Choking on Shame, The Scapegoat Child in a Narcissistic Family.
I mean,
Yeah, it's a lot. The first 45 years of my life were not kind to me, but I will talk more about this. I think the beautiful thing of looking back on things regretfully doesn't get us anywhere. We have to learn and grow through our adversities and our obstacles, and that's what I've hopefully done. And I've come to a point in my healing where I'm trying to help everybody get up here to where we are, to a better perspective, to be able to open themselves to the current, circumstances where things are good. We don't have to live in the past. The past is the past. We learn, we grow, we move on.
beautiful message for everyone
Thank
listening,
you.
myself included. So why don't we start there? Tell us a little bit about you, who you are, even your childhood, and what brought you to who you are today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, certainly, I think life brings us all to who we are. I mean, we're a product of, there's that nature versus nurture, but there's more in the nurture or the lack of, and that was my experience. So my second book, actually, Choking on Shame, goes right into it, into the circumstances of my being here, which are really, really relevant to who I am. I was born to an unwed teenage mother in the 70s. And at that time, that was not very acceptable to most. So there was a lot of shame that she carried. You add on top of that that she did not want me. Had abortion been more readily available to her and could she afford it, I would not be standing here having this conversation with you. And that was something that unfortunately I've been told. So, it's a very hard thing to hear from the person that, whose womb you came out of. But that was my childhood. She did not want me anymore after I was born. And I think I know very strongly that it's because she really didn't. I mean, when I say she didn't want me, I'm not sure she wanted any children, because right after my birth, she had her tubes tied, and I was born on her 17th birthday. So for them to do that actually is surprising, because now you can't even get them to do that when you're 30, 40 years old, you
Yeah.
know. But back then, wherever she was, they did that. And so there was always this detachment, this distance between us, physically, emotionally. She didn't even care for me. I didn't even live with her. In fact, my great grandma and my grandma came to the hospital where I was born, and they basically told my mother, "We know you don't want this baby." So grandma said, "I'll get a job, I'll pay for all of her expenses." And great grandma said, "Well, I'm home anyway, and I love kids, so I'm going to take her and take care of her like she were my own." And God love my grandma and great grandma. They are my hearts and my souls, and truly my mother's. And I'm so thankful. I have to say this, that at least I had a beginning where I knew what love was and I knew what true motherhood was. Because without those first few years of my life, I would have probably. I mean, it would not have been good for me. So mother released me to them in their care. Um, Great grandma's apartment was like Grand Central Station, where everybody just kind of came and went. There was always food. Somebody was always coming in with good news, bad news, just to see her, whatever. And I was really lucky that I had all these people, that I was there. And so I knew my aunts, uncles, cousins, all these people. And my mother was one of them. But it's strange, and a lot of people won't understand this, but it's an interesting thing for me, because I knew who my mother was and everybody said that was my mother. And I mean, I watched enough Sesame Street and Great Space Coaster and all these things to know what a mother should be, and to know. So it was weird to me, because I'm like, but great grandma is the one who gives me a bath. Great grandma rocks me at night when I can't sleep. Great grandma kisses my boo boos. Not this woman who they say is my mother. Right. The quotes. She's supposed to be my mother, but she's not, because great grandma's my mother. So it's very strange. I've always been an overthinker, even at 3, 4 years old. I was examining these, roles, and trying to make sense of my life. And then I started to think, well, I don't have a dad either. Why don't I have a dad? And I would ask these questions and I was hushed. We don't need to talk about it. You don't have a dad. Don't worry about it. Well, you can't say that to anybody, especially, I think adopted children or adults that were adopted can understand this. You want to know where you came from. But that was just kind of put on the back burner. So fast forward a little bit, mom meets somebody I'll never forget. Actually, it's one of the first chapters in Choking on Shame where I meet this man, and I mean, from the get go, just he repulsed me. He did something physically abusive to me within the first 5 minutes of meeting him. My mother did nothing. That basically set the premise of the rest of my childhood. That was the theme, was he would abuse me physically and verbally, and mother would look away. Mother basically enabled it, excused it, tolerated it, let it happen. And it was really hard because she ended up marrying him, obviously, when I was 7. And everybody thought it was a great idea that mom's marrying this older man. Oh, and he has a house and he has a car and he has all these things that my mother never thought she would ever could even think about having. Um, at least not on her own. And so we went to live with him. And, that's when things got really, really bad, because it was the everyday. And, I'll give everybody the short version. We all know what physical abuse is. And I think that it's unfortunate that when we hear anything about abuse or domestic violence, we immediately go to black eyes and just mishandling, rough handling of children and wives and things like that. But the verbal abuse, sadly, was what really stayed with me to this day. And I'm going to be 49 years old next month. It's a struggle because every single day of my life, every single day, and I'm talking about from the time I was about 4 or 5 years old on, it was, you're going to get fat if you eat that toast. You're going to have a second helping of pasta. You're going to have hips like a middle-aged woman and nobody's going to want you. And I shouldn't have to pay for another man's child, by the way. Nobody's ever going to love you. Your mother didn't even want you. I can go on and on without, I was always dumb. I was nothing. I would never be anything. There was nothing I could do. And I was that overachiever, that go-getter, always on honor roll. In fact, they wanted to move me up 2 grades because I tested so much higher than the kids that were my age and in my class. I was first chair violist in 2 different traveling symphonic orchestras. I taught myself to play piano. I danced, I sang, I did theater, I did stage performance. I mean, I was always creative, but even that was wrong. That's not real. That you can't have a career in those things. You're wasting your time. So then they stopped the lessons. They stopped the dance classes. They stopped. It was just, there was nothing that, if something brought me joy, it was taken away. It was taken away. So I ended up just locking myself in my room, and kind of turning into a Wednesday Addams, just glum and kind of a loner, always kept to myself, very withdrawn at school because I always had, it's funny, I still, as you can see, have my hair in front of my face. This started somewhere in junior high because I would often have bruises on my eyes, on my head. And so I learned to kind of put my hair over my face and keep my head down so that nobody would see. I would be the kid wearing long pants and long sleeves in 90-degree weather in the middle of July so that nobody could see the bruises and the finger marks, the hand marks on my body, including around my neck. It was awful. And so, you grow up that way. Obviously, I got out of that house as soon as I could. I didn't care. None of the material stuff meant anything to me. Money didn't mean anything to me. I would have lived on the street, on a curb, and slept on a park bench. And I mean that wholly and sincerely, if it meant me getting out of that house and just being okay and being away from them. And I was very fortunate in high school. I met a guy at work. Funny that I didn't like him very much. He was kind of player, so to speak. But you know what? He had an apartment and he was good to me. He treated me really well. So I couldn't complain about that. Um, but it's just strange to me looking back that I cared about him. I didn't love him. I would never want to think that I used somebody, but he was my way out. He invited me to come live with him. He took care of me, as far as providing shelter and food and everything else while I went to college. And, but then when he wanted to get serious, I I freaked out a little bit. He wanted to get engaged and was talking about babies and all this stuff. And I'm like, I'm 19 years old. Like, I am not like even trying to think about that right now. I'm just trying to get through school and be me and figure out who I am. And like, I'm still a baby. I'm not trying to have babies. And that wasn't enough for him. He was ready for more and I wasn't. So we parted ways. So it was kind of sad. Um, but a good thing because I was proud of myself that I was like, I'm not going to settle. I'm not going to do what my mother did, basically, because I never wanted to be like her. But this is where my first book picks up, Gasping for Air. This is where I meet my ex-husband, who I spent 25 years of my life with. And the premise of that story is that I didn't realize back then, I didn't know what a narcissist was. I didn't know what a people pleaser was. I didn't know what a codependent was. I didn't know I was all of these things bundled up with depression and anxiety and CPTSD and all this other psychological terminology, but I was a damn mess. And so it's no surprise that I fell for this person who reminded me so much. I mean, from the second I met this man, I'm like, this is my abusive stepfather. Oh my God, like steer clear. The robot from Lost in Space is waving his coily arms in my head saying, danger, danger, and Dana didn't listen. Dana's like, oh, but he's the only person who's interested in me. Nobody else is interested, and I'm going to be an old maid if nobody wants me. Just like my stepfather said, nobody's ever going to love me or want me. So I have to jump through all the hoops, and I have to please this man. I know narcissists love servitude. They love when you're, like that little puppy just begging for that treat, just waiting for them. They love having that control over you, and that's essentially what happened. I got lured in. I got sucked into his web of deceit and lies and manipulation. We got married, we had a kid, and by the end of our 25 years together, he wanted me dead. I have that in writing. He also was telling people he was planning to kill me. He made multiple attempts on my life after the divorce, ironically, because if he couldn't have me, nobody else could either. So it's been a struggle, and that was just 4 years ago that all happened. And he he purposely moved very near me. He's only 7 minutes away from where I live, still keeps very close eye on me, has even met with my priest at my church, has met with my estranged mother and stepfather recently, I found out. Still in the background, lurking in the shadows. So I'm waiting. I'm always looking over my shoulder. But the one thing that I've always told my son is that you can't worry about anyone else. You have to just live your life. Worry about yourself, worry about you, where you're going. And so I, at this point in my life, have opted to take care of me for once and say yes to Dana and no to all the things that caused me all this trauma and all this angst that I've carried in my heart for so long. And once I was willing to take care of me and do the very, very hard work in healing, which is why we're here today to talk about that, is, that's when things started really opening up for me and where I could have this inner peace despite all that ugliness and despite what I lived through, because we're not defined by our past, where we can define who we are now and we can define who we want to be in the future. And I think that's the point. That was kind of the point of my first book, Gasping for Air, is when I finally opened my eyes and asked myself, what do I want? And I knew very, very clearly I wanted to be married. I wanted to have a partner. I just wanted one that didn't want to kill me. Minor details, I wanted mutual respect and love and adoration, basic things, basic foundation in a relationship. And I wanted to travel and I wanted to use my degree in journalism. And I had always wanted to help victims of abuse, specifically child abuse. So it's kind of interesting that once I had that vision, and then my next question was, can I have that in these circumstances? No, there was no way. There was no way. So I had to change my circumstances. I had to decide, so do I want to give him, the wife, the slave of a wife, of a Stepford wife that this man wants and continue to suffer and die inside? Or do I want to live my life, my best life? And I chose me. That was my first yes to myself. And that was the first time that I finally set a boundary. And it was very uncomfortable. And it's hard. And I think that fear of the unknown is what keeps us from doing most anything in life. But gosh, like I said, 4 years. It's only been 4 years. I am remarried to somebody that actually loves and respects me and treats me like Princess and the Pea. And I've known him 20 years, so it's kind of strange. He was always there, like he was there. I've known his family 20 years. I take that back. I've known him for 6 or 7. But I've also published 2 books, almost 3. And I've created a platform for myself where I am advocating and I am making a difference in people's lives. I get messages every day that people are inspired to heal, to overcome, to leave their abusive situations, to make a better life for themselves. And I love that because I think that's the biggest reason that I'm here today, is that I had struggled so much. I had even thought many, many times, and I'm full disclosure, even this year, thought of suicide, because you just hurt so bad sometimes, that you just don't want to hurt anymore. And that's what it comes down to. And I think that when I finally got with the right person to help me with my healing, and she shifted my perspective, and I have to be clear, this is what healing is about, is shifting your perspective. I realized that I had always been meant to live this life. And I was exactly where I was supposed to be. But it's funny because as a kid, my mother always scolded me and said, you always have to do things to find out, don't you? You can't just listen. You have to experience it. Well, apparently that's part of my soul. I had to experience child abuse. I had to experience an abusive marriage. I had to be a victim to understand what it felt like. I mean, it's psychological warfare, it's mental torment. And I think realizing that, but also having been given the gifts of communication, of writing and speaking and all this other stuff, I don't think that was an accident. I think I was always meant to experience it so that I could then relay it to others, that I could verbalize it, that I could make sense of it all for them, if not for myself as well, so that I could begin this journey for myself and then help others along in their healing as well.
I was tearing up the entire time you were telling your story. For one reason, because a lot of the things that you said landed for me, and it was kind of bringing up some stuff too. But also, we had a call before this recording, and I got to know you. And this is what blows my mind with family constellation therapy with clients too. I meet the most beautiful people, energetically, emotionally, like even physically, just the most beautiful people. And yet they have gone through the deepest pain, and it just moves you to hear your story. It just absolutely moves me. And also, it's just this interesting perspective that you had that this was only 4 years ago, and yet how far you've come in 4 years with this perspective is incredible. Incredible. I have so many follow-up questions that are not part of the questions that we had earlier, but I'm so curious. You said you were with your ex-husband for 25 years.
Yeah.
And you said you decided that you had to start taking care of yourself. At what point did that come? Was it fueled by anything? And then how did you know how to take care of yourself? Because I think the one thing that people struggle with, especially in like long-term abusive or like harmful relationships, is knowing themselves because they've been so abused emotionally and gaslit. Like,
Yes.
how do they know how do they connect with themselves? How did you do that?
Yeah, there's a lot there. So I'm kind of going to start at the end of your questioning and go back. I absolutely 100%. If you're with it, I could argue, and we'll have to talk about narcissism and break that down real quick too. But when you're with a narcissist, they dictate everything. So I have to be very clear that in childhood, then in my marriage, I mean, everything from what I was eating, the lipstick I wore, the clothes I wore, how my hair I mean, everything. My ex-husband would even ask me a question and then follow it up by saying, and immediately follow it up by saying, your answer should be da 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 da. And I'm like, if why don't you talk to yourself then? If you're going to tell me what to say too, but everything was dictated and regimented. So if you want to talk about people say, well, you lose yourself, to say you lost yourself, they take away every thought, every decision, every opportunity to live freely and independently and be uniquely who you are. When I say Stepford wife, I was also a Stepford child. My mother would tell me, stop rolling your R's. She'd straighten my hair. Don't tell anyone you're Puerto Rican. Don't tell. I lived this life where my authenticity was literally stolen from me. And so, yes, I came to a point in my marriage. I mean, the funny thing is that when I was walking down the aisle marrying my first husband, literally the wedding march started. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, what the hell am I doing? I knew we were going to be divorced. So
So did
it
I.
isn't that terrible. And it's like, you don't get married to get divorced, but it's amazing what we do to please others, and the things that we do that we know aren't the right thing, but we do them anyway. So, my reasoning, and I'm just going to say this and put it out there because I don't want anyone to think, I mean, we all have our reasons for many things, but my ex-husband's parents were like Mr. and Mrs. Cleaver. They were the loveliest people in the entire world. And I mean, his father told me he was proud of me, and, his mother was always calling me, and I had this beautiful relationship with them that I didn't want to give up. And so my ex was basically the price to pay for having the parents that I never had. And so that for me was like the thing that made me hold on for all that time. But unfortunately, my father in law passed away in 2005. My mother in law kind of she was widowed for the second time when he passed. So she was going through her own trauma herself. I mean, I'm obviously stunted because I can't even imagine losing one husband, never mind two. So the family just kind of dissipated. And that's when, I was kind of in my marriage, like with this man, without the support of his dad and without the support of his mother. And even his sister kind of drifted away a little bit. She had become my best friend. So it was really hard to get through, but it was actually when I got sick and I didn't even know what was going on. It was towards the end of 2018. I had actually undergone over a year of testing because you can feel when something's going on in your body. And I was having so many random symptoms. It started with blacking out quite a bit. My hands were going numb. Sometimes my entire right arm would go numb. And I want people to be clear, like I was one of those weirdos who ran 5 miles a day. I coached cross country at the grade school. I ate like hard-boiled eggs and apples for lunch. Like I'm one of those health nuts. I've always taken care of my physical body. maybe well, not maybe, probably very much a result of my childhood where I was constantly berated for what I ate and how my body looked and all this. So I was very aware of my physical appearance. So it didn't make sense that I was struggling physically. My muscles were stiffening. I was short of breath. I was starting to have more panic attacks. Like, I mean, the sweating, the anxiety, the heart racing. Um, at one point, I swore I had a heart attack and I was terrified. And, you know, there were just so many things going on. And I'm a type A, I'm a Capricorn. So, of course, I made a spreadsheet on Excel with all my symptoms and I marked every single time that I felt something so that when I went to the doctor, I could say, I wanted to visually see like patterns and I wanted to be able to say, like, well, when they say, how often does this happen? Where I could say, well, it happened 14 times that week or whatever, like break it down. That's very important to me because I needed to know what was going on and to know I wasn't crazy. But unfortunately, Western medicine is such that, you know, one doctor literally threw her arms up and said, I don't know, there's stuff going on with you, but I can't pinpoint it, but I'll give you a pill for this. I don't want pills. I want a solution. Another doctor told me I was hypersensitive and, you know, yeah, that just exactly. I pulled my head back and opened my mouth too. Like, are you kidding me? Like, and the thing was, there were multiple doctors, specialists. They were all doing tests on me and finding things. But I'm talking about, I was failing neurological exams. Neuropathy was found. Heart issues were found. Cardiovascular stuff was going on like crazy. Muscular issues were, I mean, they started going into autoimmunity. Like, does she have MS? Does she have lupus? Does she have fibromyalgia? Like, what is going on? Well, ironically, it took a sleep neurologist, and this is where we are at the end of 2018. He started testing me for, he had he's like, I think I know what's going on. So he put me through a round of tests, got me with Mayo Clinic. They ended up doing a cortisol test on me. So cortisol, for those who don't know, is a stress hormone. When you're in that mode of fight or flight mode where you just want to get the heck out of there or put your dukes up and fight this, you know, whatever this is that's coming at you, your cortisol runs through you. It's very, I call it like the sister to adrenaline, very much the same. So Mayo Clinic calls me back and says, well, we think we compromised your labs. So we need you to do this test again because there's no way these are your correct results. So we do the test again. And if anyone has not had this test, cortisol is done by swabbing the saliva in your mouth 5 different times a day. And I mean, you have to wake up in the middle of the night even to take a swab because that's when your cortisol should be the lowest. You're sleeping, you should be at rest, at peace. And your cortisol levels at any given time, even during extreme stress, so they should never be over 700. And when you're sleeping, they should be around 100. So 100 to 700 is where the range should be. Well, the second test was done and they said, oh crap, well, I guess we didn't compromise the first ones. My levels were, excuse me, consistently 24 hours a day over 2,540. So over 4 times the highest that they should be. Oh. I had at this point within 2 weeks dropped down to 93 skeletal pounds. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I needed an oxygen machine with the mask. This was even right before COVID. So like I looked like the freak out in public with the mask on my face. They're saying wear gloves. Like, so basically I was autoimmune. The cortisol had basically come into my body at obviously these astronomical rates that my white blood cells decided that there was some foreign intruder that they needed to eradicate. They eradicated themselves. So I was autoimmune and I had developed this lung disease that this is what you hear, the scratchiness that's coming up now that I'm talking and using oxygen. I have upper airway resistance syndrome. That is a rare lung syndrome that is, the doctor appropriately said, it's like having COPD and fibromyalgia all at once. So that explains all these random symptoms. But the kicker was, he said, The other issue is your body is shutting down because it's doing everything for you to breathe and keep your heart beating. That's why you feel so stiff. You're basically like rigor mortis walking around trying to move. Like he said, you're like a 90-year-old lady inside this 45-year-old woman's body. So he says, I don't know what is causing you so much stress, but it is literally going to kill you because your body is not functioning how it's supposed to. And that is when I had the wake up call. That is when I laid in bed that night and said, I don't want this. I don't want to die. I mean, I thought about dying. I wished for dying sometimes, but I didn't really want to die. I had a son I wanted to live for, and there was no way in hell I was going to leave this earth and leave him with that narcissistic, violent, abusive a-hole. Forgive my language, but that was time to start putting me first. And that was when I asked myself, what do I want? And that's the key question for anybody. And then it's, do you really want this? Can I have what I want in this situation? No. And at that point, I just wanted to live. And could I live in that? No, not with this person, because I had given him 25 years to be better. One thing narcissists always will do is, I'll be better. I'll change. I'll do this. I'll do that. Just, they know that you're pulling away, so they try to keep you. And I was done. I could not do it anymore. And he would pull out all these stops like, well, I won't live without you, I'll kill myself, do you want me to do that? And trying to guilt me into, and I'm a good Catholic girl and the guilt works on me. But it didn't anymore, because this was literally my life or his. And as selfish as that sounds, it's not selfish. It's just about wanting to, I just wanted to breathe. I just wanted to live my life. Yeah. So that was the turning point for me. That was, and it's sad to me. I have to say this because anybody that's been in it, abuse can have varying degrees. But at this point, it should have been when he swung a crowbar at my head that I took my kid and left. It should have been when he made me overdose on prescription medication and then dragged my limp body into the bathroom and closed the door, hoping I would just die. I should have left, but I didn't. It should have been all the times he missed me when he was punching and I ducked or moved so that he couldn't. It should have been the knife. It should have been the gun. It should have been all these other things that anybody in their right mind would leave that relationship. But I was still there. It was when my body turned on me, when my body said, screw this, we're out, that I finally woke up and said, okay, something's got to change here. And that makes me sad. That makes me really sad.
We have this incredible line that we say in family constellation therapy around the idea of belonging, where, primally we want to belong so bad and we just desire connection so bad that many times when somebody is in a situation like yours, as a facilitator, sometimes I feel it's appropriate, not always, but sometimes, to say, is your need for belonging so great that you will compromise this? Or is your need for, and so that comes up when you talk, because it's something that I should have asked myself in my, and I'm not comparing, I was in an emotionally abusive relationship with my ex-husband. You should have blonde hair. You should be really tall. You should be skinny. You should be tan. Every time I got my hair done, he's like, it should be blonder. I was basically like as blonde as you could go, like constantly calling me fat and putting me down. And so, I wish I would have back then been able to say, Catherine, is your need for belonging so great you're going to lose, and you said it beautifully, lose your authenticity and lose yourself for somebody who doesn't value you? And back then I would have said, yeah, I'm willing to give up. Like, I'm willing to do it. So it's just interesting how it wasn't about him for you. It was about you having to pick yourself up in that story and really, and pull yourself through it, because it was you had to take care of you. So I really appreciate you sharing that. Again, like, I have tears in my eyes. One, because my heart aches for another human being to go through those things, but also because it reflects this very complicated subconscious and primal dynamic in relationships with people. And if for people listening, if your subconscious mind knows and believes that being abused is how you relate and belong and connect and whatever, like you will continue those patterns because it's what your subconscious knows that you deserve or believe. It's like that part of your brain won't come on and say you should walk away until there's like a very prominent reason for it, which is your health. It was, for me, it was my health too. For some people, it's that somebody else gets involved and says, you need to leave and I'm taking you out of it. Like that, everyone has a different situation. So I'm curious, we talked so much about narcissism. Can you kind of describe what narcissism is?
Yes.
I believe it's on a spectrum of some kind. I don't know
Yes.
if you feel that way. Just kind of take us through what narcissism looks like. Hey guys, it's Kat popping in during the episode today to tell you about my free cycle breaker quiz. Do you ever feel stuck in the same family patterns or even feel like the black sheep of your family, and not in a good way? I felt like that my entire life. What if I told you that you could transform that role into something way more powerful, more meaningful, and more magical? With my cycle breaker quiz, I created this to help you understand the childhood coping tools that you are still replaying in your adult life. They're still showing up. And by understanding how you show up with your family in the role that you play, this can be the portal into understanding the patterns of your entire lineage just by looking at you. Whether you're the parentified child, the comedian, the rebel, the hyper independent, or like me, the caregiver, this quiz will give you the insights that you need to reframe any resentment about how your childhood has shaped you. Once you take the quiz, you'll get a short and personalized podcast episode in your email inbox that dives into your archetype, helping you see the strengths that you've gained from growing up in this complex family. I'll even share with you the potential challenges that you may be facing as this archetype, and I'll even share with you a spirit animal to work with along the way, because who doesn't love a good spirit animal? The shift from black sheep to cycle breaker is a powerful one, and I want to support you along the way. Ready to embrace your role? All you have to do is go to catdao.com/cycle breaker to take the quiz. Again, that's catdao.com/cycle breaker to take the quiz. Your transformation from black sheep to cycle breaker starts right now.
Yeah, I can break it down pretty easily. So let's start with the word narcissist. It actually comes from the name of the Greek god Narcissus, who used to supposedly look at his reflection in the water because he was so handsome. And so he just liked to look at his reflection. And we all know these people. We see them on social media in their swimsuits, their little bikinis, or the guys with their abs, or the girls with their lashes. And you want to hate them, but you know what? They really do look as good as they think they do. So you can't. You're just like, I wish I had that kind of self-esteem, and I wish I looked like that too. So that is what a narcissist truly was meant to be. Now, what it has come to mean is something completely different, and there's some irony in it. It has come to mean, very basically, somebody who is very full of themselves. But the irony here is that there are those overt narcissists, those typical narcissists that we think of, and this is my stepfather, that they really do think like they are the best, they're the smartest, they're the best looking, they have the most. And you'll see these people, they have the biggest house, the brand name clothes, the Rolex watch, driving the Cadillac or the Hummer or whatever it is, whatever high. They're all about high status and perception. They have to be perceived as being superior to other people, or more important. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky and where the spectrum comes in. The way I describe this is like tumors. There's benign tumors and malignant tumors. Your benign tumors there, it's not bothering you. Those are your actual narcissists, those people on social media. You might get annoyed by them, but they're really not bothering anybody. They're just doing their thing, and God love them. I honestly wish I had a little bit of that self-esteem. Then you go through the spectrum all the way on the other end. This is where my stepfather and my ex-husband fall, those malignant narcissists, malignant tumors. They're going to cause you problems. They might even kill you. and they have to be removed. There's no other option. And that is the only way to deal with those people. There is no rehabilitating them. They're not going to suddenly come to some level of self-awareness. They will never even admit to wrongdoing or mistreatment, or God forbid, if you suggest that they have something mentally deficient, their ego can't withstand that kind of offense. So they will actually turn things around on you and say, well, I only said or did that. I only, you pushed me to do that. If you hadn't done that, because it's never their fault, they do not take accountability. But the prime indicators of any narcissist that intentionally harms another human being, which is what a malignant narcissist is that they have no remorse and no empathy. They honestly, wholeheartedly feel justified in treating you the way that they do because they honestly think that they are better than you in some way. The irony, where this irony comes in, and this is my last tidbit, is that oftentimes, like with my ex, you have what a lot of narcissists are what we call covert narcissists. They are actually very insecure. They want to be perceived as important or more important than they believe they are. So they will bait you and manipulate you into giving them admiration and praise. They will put themselves in situations where they are the do-gooder. They are charitable, they're generous, they're funny, they're charming, so that they are perceived in the way they want to be perceived. But they themselves know that they are ugly and awful inside because that's how they feel about themselves. So it sort of is a misery loves company. They just have that one person at home, though, that they just they call that supply, and it could be a spouse, it could be a child, it could be anybody, it could be a relative, a friend, a coworker, but they have that one person that they basically prey upon to fulfill their ego, their need to dominate and control, and to give them that sense of power. And it's really disgusting, but unfortunately there's so many of us that, like for me, I admit I was looking, like you said, for love at all costs. And you hit the nail on the head with belonging. That has been like the core theme of my life. Having been born into a situation where I was rejected and abandoned, basically, all I had been looking for in my life was to belong. So that essentially is what led me and made me, susceptible, I guess is the best word, to all this other stuff. But I think once we get to that point where we can acknowledge what happened and understand what happened, that's when we can begin, if we so choose, to kind of dig up those core issues and deal with them head on, because unless you deal with them, you will continue to repeat them. And then our kids repeat them, just like I repeated history like my mother did, and my mother repeated my grandma's history. And I've traced this back 8 generations. And I'm standing here saying it took me 45 years, but I am the cycle breaker. I am okay now with being the one that has been exiled from the family because I spoke the truth, that I'm the one who's different. I'm the one who broke free and said, no more, not enough. This crap ends with me. I'm good with that, because if that means that going forward, I'm setting the premise for a better life for my kid and my grandkids, then thank God. Then thank God. That's a sacrifice worth making.
I want to shout that message from the rooftops. I mean, my work is all about helping people move out of the perspective that they're the black sheep and really see that they are the cycle breaker. And you nailed it, that it comes with owning the truth and not being afraid to face it and speak it. And I always say that the reason that I feel I've gotten so much out of family constellation therapy is because the quote growing up is, don't air your dirty laundry outside the family. And so then nobody talked about their dirty laundry. And it's not like I'm going out and like telling people my family's like these horrible people. They're human. Right. Everyone makes mistakes, but they're also great people too in their own way.
Right.
But I started uncovering the dirty laundry. I started looking for the truth. And in that, I found how I was enmeshed in that trauma. And I
Yes.
was repeating it so I could get love and connection because I didn't feel it all the time as a kid.
That's
So,
exactly true. I want to say this too, if I may intercede for one moment.
yeah,
I think it's important for us to understand that the generational differences in society are primarily what's causing this little disruption about those of us speaking the truth. Because, I'm Gen X, and like my husband's on the border of baby boomer, but he's a total baby boomer. But that generation, that my mother and my husband unfortunately are in, yeah, I have daddy issues. It's okay though. He's good to me. Um, it was always keep your mouth shut. That's a family matter. You keep that at home. And it's interesting because it wasn't until I was in college, the Violence Against Women's Act was passed in 1994 when I was in college. And that act was the beginning for women to be able to press charges against their husband for domestic violence.
only in
Prior
1994?
prior to 1994, you could not, as a woman, press charges against your husband for domestic abuse or violence. So this is huge but even in 1994, and I even encountered this in 2020 because my ex isolation is like narcissism 101, isolate from friends and family. He moved me out to this small podunk town 90 miles away from anything and everything I've ever known, where it's kind of, ass backwards. It's like Andy Griffith. So they're a little behind the times. Like, I'm still waiting for high-speed internet, like, no joke. And now it's 2024. But out here in 2020, I'm calling the cops for the first time after my divorce, after being with this man for 25 years, and he shoots a gun outside my bedroom window in the middle of the night in 2024. I called the cops for the first time on him, and they did not arrest him. They did not take him off my property, even though he was trespassing. They did not do anything. In fact, I left because they were going to leave me there with this madman who he was barefoot, drunk, and running around with a gun like a crazy person. And and he had planned to kill me. He had already made it very clear to me and neighbors and other people that he was planning to kill me. And it was I honestly thought I was going to die that night, but these cops didn't do a damn thing. They didn't file a report. They didn't press charges. Nothing. Because in their minds, and in the minds of a lot of people still, those older generations, this is a family matter. You don't talk about that in public. You don't put that out there. And so we have to remember this, that those of us that are coming out, and now that, we have social media, we have all these things, because I know that the younger generation finds it hard to believe, but internet didn't start until 1995. And even then we had the dial up, like it took 20 minutes to even get on. And God forbid, if you pressed a button, you had to wait another 5 minutes to get, it was awful. But now that communication is so quick and you can communicate with people at any given time, and we have all these social media platforms where people are sharing and exposing and revealing. I mean, now we're getting down to the truth of things. Now we're able to openly and freely speak. And this is huge. But the change is still trying to catch up, because there is rarely any justice for anybody that has been a victim or a survivor of abuse or domestic violence, unless they end up dead. And the sad reality, and this is shocking even to me, but our own government, the CDC, released this year this statistic that 38%, and listen to me, people, 38% of all women killed are killed by their partner or ex-partner. 38%. That's more than a third. That to me is scary. That scares the hell out of me as a woman. How do we go out there and date? How do we trust? How do we even get married knowing that we have a 38% chance that if we're killed, it's going to be this person that says they love us. That's horrific to me. And I want to say, adding on to this, do not dismiss emotional and verbal abuse. Because I'll tell you what, I've had black eyes, I've had bruises of hand marks around my neck. I've had awful things happen to me physically. Honestly, doesn't faze me. It's the words that were used on me. It was the psychological warfare that affected me, being made to feel like I was the nothing that I was told that I was, being made to feel that my body, that, I'm going to be 49, like I said, next month. And I still, to this day, if God forbid a little too much time goes by that my husband doesn't, come and try to get a little bit from me, I start to wonder, did I gain too much weight? I shouldn't have eaten all that ice cream or all that pizza. Like, I start thinking there's something wrong with me because it's my stepfather in my head telling me, oh yeah, keep eating that pasta. Have that second helping. Nobody's ever going to want you. And that's disgusting, where I have to actually stop myself and say, no, Dana, he made you believe that about yourself, but that is not true. Your husband loves you. He loves your heart. He loves your mind. It is not your body. I mean, he doesn't mind it, but you have to, there's these things. I mean, I'm trying to be funny and lighten things up because that's what I naturally do. But the reality is that the words, the emotional abuse, the verbal abuse affects us more. And similarly, just under 40% of all children abused have more effects from the emotional and verbal abuse than they do from physical. I will not put sexual in that category because that's a whole other realm that is just disgusting and has lifelong effects. But, this is stuff that we really need to address in society. Because one more statistic I'll throw at you. They say right now in this country, half of all children under the age of 18 will experience at least 4 incidences of bullying, domestic violence, or abuse, either to themselves or to somebody else. And what does that say to me? That says to me that we're becoming very unfazed by what is happening right under our nose. And that is really alarming.
Whew. I mean, I have
know,
so
it's
many
a lot.
things to say. No, but it's, you know what? This information is imperative for people to understand. Trying to remember all the questions that I had coming up. I actually had a therapist for about 3 or 4 months who is well known in the therapy world. I'll just put it that way. Who told me that she was physically and emotionally abused by her mother. And she said to me, because I was kind of wrangling with some emotional abuse stuff from my childhood, and I go, well, no one ever put their hands on me. She goes, Kat, I was physically abused by my mom, bruises and everything. She goes, nothing fucked me up. Sorry, my language. Like my mom's words that she said to me, because she said they still play in my head today. And she's in her 70s almost.
Yeah.
So there's so much to be said that it's not that physical abuse doesn't have an impact on you, because it does, but the emotional, psychological warfare that happens in that kind of abuse is next level. And also this interesting idea that I feel that my experience with narcissists is that they don't know how to have empathy and put themselves in other people's shoes. For instance, not asking, how are you doing? Or wanting closeness with you or caring about how you feel. It's always about them and what they're doing, what they want, what they see. And there's never any recollection for, how's your heart doing? How was your week? Why do empaths usually attract narcissists? And do you consider yourself an empath?
I'm one of those people, like, yes, I have been told I am a very high level empath. Ironically, my mother, since I was very young, had always scolded me for being too sensitive and too emotional. And I'm one of those people that I walk in a room and I either, like, people just get rubbed the wrong way by me, like I stir up their demons, or they make, like, I can't be around big crowds without like sweating and like my heart racing, because I feel all this energy coming at me. And I know, like, I can't even talk about it with too many people because the normal polite society says, oh, that's crazy, that's hoodoo voodoo stuff. I don't care what you call it, but I'm also one of those people that walks around in the world. And if I come across anybody who's a psychic, a medium, a healer, any kind of spiritualist, they will literally stop and like acknowledge me and be like, did you know? I'm like, you're not the first one to say that to me. I have been told many things, but they're all very consistent that yes, I am an empath. I am meant to heal. I have all this power in me, which I don't feel so powerful sometimes, but it is amazing that we all have this power. And the empath and narcissist thing is very interesting. So I have 2 points on that. Number one, narcissists love empaths. They can almost sniff them out because a narcissist needs to be with somebody who they can basically pull the wool over your eyes. And as empaths, what do we want to do? We want to help people. We see hope. Our hearts are open and just letting it in. And I remember like trying to have conversations with my ex, or sharing the homily that I heard at church that I thought might make his mind work in a certain way to be more, kind-hearted towards me. I remember reading him books or telling him about psychological studies, and then he decided I couldn't read books, and he didn't even want me on the internet anymore. And it became a thing where he just wanted to cut off all communication from me in the outside world. I didn't even have a smartphone until after he moved out during the divorce. No joke, in 2020. So it's a very interesting thing because people often say, well, what are the red flags? I could list all their different qualities. Like you said, no remorse, no empathy, all these other things. And, even if you're not an empath, there are people that come from very happy childhoods. And I've seen this happen where they just can't conceive that anybody would have bad intentions or be manipulative, or that people would be that cruel. So if you can't see it in that other person, you treat them, with the kindness and the grace and all these things that honestly these narcissists don't deserve. But, these are the people that fall prey to narcissists. And it's when we open our eyes and finally accept that, one, they're not going to change. Two, their promises are full of crap. It's just a way to lure you and keep you, because they don't want to have to start over and learn somebody else. They already know how to work you. Why should they put that much effort into anything? And three, they need you. You don't need them as much as you think you do. They need you. And they see that in you. They see your kindness, they see your potential, they see all these wonderful things in you, and I hate to say, they're either jealous of it and want to keep it down, don't want you to achieve all the things that you can, or they just don't want to see you win. They can't stand when you have success or you have joy, or everything has to come back, like you said, to them. It has to be related to them. I know with my ex, like, God forbid if I smiled or laughed at somebody's joke, it had to be his jokes that were funny, not somebody else's. I couldn't watch TV with my son and laugh at something somebody said in the movie we were watching, because then we would be ridiculed that we didn't need him. You're just living your life without me. Dude, we're just watching a movie and enjoying each other's company. And I'm giving these little examples because these are the little things in daily life that relate back to these narcissists' need to be the one and only person. This is why they isolate you from family and friends. My ex didn't want me watching anything, reading anything, being on the internet, didn't want me to have a smartphone. He didn't, God forbid, if my phone buzzed, if I got a text or a phone call, not when I was at home, not in front of him. He had to be the only one that I talked to, the only one who had influence over me, the only one who controlled me. And it was the same with my stepfather. The only thing is that my mother chose, and still to this day is with my stepfather, she chooses to let him control her and control their lives. And in that mess, she decided she could not be my mother and his wife, and chose to be his wife instead of my mother. And that is when we became estranged. But I've done so much healing work to get okay with that. And my own little point on that is just, the two people in my life have said this to me, that, we are here, we're born into a family, we're born to a mother, maybe a father, whatever the dynamic is. But this idea that we're the black sheep, we're the outsider, we're the scapegoat. I appreciate that you had said that that doesn't mean that you're the one who's different, the odd man out, so to speak, because that's not the case at all. We have to remember we were put here, whether you believe in God or not. I'm sorry to tell you, creation, fate, God, goddess, whatever you believe in, that is what put you here. You were meant to be here. You were meant to endure the circumstances that you were endured. The body that you came out of, the womb you came out of, was just the earthly manner by which you were brought here. But it is not the determining factor in who you are and what you are bound to. It is only, it's kind of like if anyone remembers Mork and Mindy, Mork from Mork, he was just kind of dropped here on the earth in that big egg. I don't know why. Sorry, that's one of my Gen X little
Okay.
pop culture references. But we're here, we were brought here, but we are not bound to that. So yes, I wish I had a mother that was loving and wonderful, like my mother-in-law was, and like some other women have been. I wish it had been my great grandma, not my mother, that had me. But the fact is, I'm here, and I can find love in this world and nurturing, not just within myself, but in other people, if I stop focusing on the stuff that isn't working for me and start focusing on what was really meant for me.
That's so profound. Hey guys, it's Kat. You have reached the end of part 1. How freaking powerful is Dana's life experience? Anyone else have full body chills during the entire episode? Same. Pretty much cried the whole time too. If you loved this, please rate, subscribe, and review the podcast to help other people hear Dana's message with narcissistic abuse. And make sure that if you are somebody that has experienced narcissistic abuse, you are reaching out for tools and support, you can also go to Dana's website. It is linked below in the show notes to find a community of people who can support you through your experience as well. Stay tuned for next week on part 2. We're going to get into some more of the healing side of Dana's experience and some advice that she has for somebody who's going through narcissistic abuse. And as always, if you rate, subscribe, and review the episode, make sure to screenshot it and send it to me on Instagram, where I enter your name in to win a free intuitive reading with me. It's probably going to be a powerful 35 minutes where you will get some guidance on things that are happening in your life and any ancestral parts that we can bring to light to help you heal. So make sure you're following me on Instagram, because I announce the winner there on the last day of each month. Thanks, guys. See you next week.